Hey, folks, welcome back to Chris Wyatt Reports on the Wyatt Independent News Network. We are talking once again with a friend of the program, someone that we've talked to since the early days of the United Independent Movement, none other than love him, hate him, revile him, hug him, chase him away, kiss him, Neil de Beer, president of the United Independent Movement, member of the Cape Town Council, and I believe an MEC. He's on the Mayoral's Executive Committee for Public Safety, if I'm not mistaken, and one of the few voices out there that consistently calls attention to the horrific crime that takes place in the Cape Flats. Neil de Beer, welcome back to the program. Hoe gaan dit?
Altijd goed. Dit gaan goed, Chris. It looks like you are somewhere on a field of vineyards, which is a good setting. And
Yes.
I wouldn't mind having some of those bottles of wine at this moment, Chris. It's going rough.
Well,
I
that's
am
Goed Constantia is what that is behind me.
Love it. Yeah, Chris, I'm a city councillor. My oversight role is that of safety and security. JP Smith is the mayoral committee member and the one that is currently being spoken about so much. I'm still the president of the UIM, leading the councillors across the country, and also have now become a little bit of a commentator on our business news program. And that is going quite well, Chris. I mean, we're drawing something like 100,000 a week. So somewhere, someone doesn't just hate me.
Yeah, no, I do want to tell you because I think we chatted since you started doing the biz news thing regularly, but it hadn't grown into what it's grown into now. And I want to congratulate you on that. It's clearly getting a lot of traction. It's I think, if not the top feature, one of the top features on that program now. I'm kind of envious. By the way, I just want to point out here, someone that once upon a time was someone that disliked you a lot, was a big detractor of yours, and then grew to appreciate who you were. Ronaldo Guz, former member of the Democratic Alliance and member of Parliament, is in the chat. Ronaldo asked me to send him the link. He wanted to be here because he wants to hear what Neil's got to say today, and in a very positive fashion. So that's good to see. So Neil, look, a few things have been happening in South Africa. Of course, unfortunately, this unfolds our conversation today on a huge day of tragedy, as President Bush just said, or not President Bush, excuse me, President Trump just said a few moments ago. A dark and excruciating day in America as a Black Hawk helicopter collided with an American Airlines commercial flight last night, 67 fatalities, plunging into the Potomac River. And unfortunately, I know exactly the spot. I used to run on the river when I was working at the Defense Intelligence Agency, right there. Probably 50 meters from where those planes are lying those aircraft are lying in the Potomac. So sad news there. But as we turn our attention from what's happening in America back to South Africa, very consequential times here. The government of national unity was supposed to be working in the interest of South Africans, but I want to get your take on this because I'm curious. But I mean, I'm basically saying, in my view, that the government of national unity has not chastised the African National Congress, which got just 40% of the popular vote, amongst those who bothered to rock up and vote, which was pretty low. But the African National Congress is acting as if the National Democratic Revolution is in full force and all of their policies are being implemented under the guise of the government of national unity, with the Democratic Alliance, the Freedom Plus, Inkatha Freedom Party, all part of that. And we've now seen the Bella Bill been implemented, which many people are angry about. We've seen this recent proposal by Parks Tau about 3% corporate tax on the profits given to only black businesses in South Africa to enrich them, your competition. And now the most frightening of all of them, expropriation without compensation, which I have been telling South Africans for years, especially on this program, but even when I write and in the previous world and also in the intelligence world, that this expropriation without compensation is not about farmland. It is, but it's about property. And to me, it's a political tool to cowl the opposition. Because, Neil, if you are saying things about the government and they don't want to hear it, they're going to come to you and say, well, probably not you, Neil. You won't be frightened by this, but we'll pick your cousin, Johan. I don't know who your cousin is, but Johan de Beer. And Neil's cousin, Johan de Beer, he's been talking loudly about the government. He's unhappy about their policies on social media. And so the government comes to him and says, listen, you better knock it off on X, or, do you like that Land Rover? It won't be there next week. Do you like your pension fund? Because we're going to take it. And I think that's what the government of the day will use this for. So anyway, that's a long lead in. Neil de Beer, any comments or any thoughts as we get started to talk about all these topics? The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, Chris, I've been with you since the inception. You were one of the first foreign media that interviewed me when I horrendously left my international business and entered this thing called politics. I must tell you my hart verlang na besigheid. I am in politics because of one reason, and that is I thought which I could practice in global business, which I was successful to run a multitude of international funds across the world, and then come into politics and fix stuff. Politics doesn't work that way. It doesn't fix it. It prohibits you to fix it. And when you start fixing it too well, they tell you to stop fixing stuff because you're over fixing stuff. Because when you overfix stuff, you've got to take money which they don't want you to use to fix stuff because they need to put it in their pocket. So I've just now sounded like your ex-minister of defense when he said, we know the unknown, and the known knowns should be found out what is known. And that's, do you remember? So it's a quagmire of
yes,
rubble.
I do remember Donald Rumsfeld all too well. He's passed on since then, but yeah, the known knowns.
So Chris, just a background. You know, a lot of people like me, and a lot of people don't like me. Those that don't like me normally don't get from me what they want. They bloody lie to me, or I find out that they are idiots. And that is just how simple it is. I don't suffer fools. You know that I'm also at the end of cycles of certain life. You know, personally, I am carrying the big cancer at the moment, Chris. And let me quickly tell you, although I'm giving it hell, do you know what stage 4 lung cancer has given me? It's given me
it's probably giving you a new outlook on life.
Oh, yeah.
And I should tell you that, Neil, I think you know this, that my mother suffered from stage 4 metastatic lung cancer. And she actually went on one of those newer drugs, Truvada or Keytruda, one of those, I'm not sure which it was. And it extended her life, and the cancer stopped, and it actually began to diminish over time, slowly, imperceptibly, but it was over time measurable. She, unfortunately, when COVID came along, you had to get that intravenously and go to the hospital for it. So they weren't allowed to come to the hospital because of COVID. And then they put her on, pills that she could take. Within 90 days, the cancer spread throughout her body. So I can relate to what you're talking about, but I suspect your point is that it's giving you a different perspective on life and what your time on this planet means. Correct?
Yeah, it's given me a no shit attitude. I fear no one.
Okay.
I'm absolutely not scared.
I did want to say no shit attitude, but okay, we'll go with that.
No, so I'm here because I have decided that I want to be here. And if it is my last days on this earth, I am vehemently, even now more, going to fight for the right of the people that get bullied, that get told that they have no voice, the people that pick and take people and just rumble them because of their segmented power. I don't like it. And the ANC is becoming that street house bully, and seemingly they have taken a couple of GNU people with them, bullshitted them, totally covered them in blue lights and money, and now they are swallowed and are following the same suit. So when we look at the draconianness of what's happening in the development of our country, and Chris, I come from both sides, as you know. That's one thing I do know, and the older I get, the more I understand the years I served in the apartheid machine and the years I served in the ANC intelligence machine. It's kind of coming now to the head where I'm looking at both and I'm going, wow, you're similar. You're looking at each other in the mirror. And the laws that are now coming out, it is absolutely ridiculous laws that are being presented to curb the economy, stifle the human being, not address the looting, stopping crime, addressing unemployment, killing off the scenario of state coffer dispensation, taking on NHI. Now it's land. And you're right, Chris, for 8 years, I told the people, you are making a mistake. It's not land without compensation. It's property. Go read the law. And what that includes is your gun, it is your intellectual property, your car, your vehicle, your business. They didn't put property in there because they were dumb. So now we have gone through Bella, take our voice and language away. Now land away. Now NHI, our health away. And I predicted, as everybody's now gone mad, number 4, is they are going to enforce black equity even more. So they'll go from 51 BEE to 75. Then I want to create a 100 billion fund to do economic empowerment. What the hell have you then been doing since 94? Sorry, you can just see I'm offloading. I will get a little bit calmer. But that's what we are facing at this moment. And you can see it, Chris.
It's quite all right to offload. That's why we've got you here, Neil, to share your opinions. I mean, I share my opinions, but I'm not a South African, so not everybody gives it the credence that it deserves. But it's exactly right what you just talked about there. This is just absolute insanity here, and it dismays me how South Africans don't see what's going on. In the case of the Bella Bill, it's been portrayed in the legacy media and by many politicians in South Africa as a white Afrikaans issue. I do not understand. Now, listen, my mother tongue, of course, is English, although I speak several languages. And it is a colonial language, if you want to use that terminology. I mean, that's a fair terminology, I suppose. It colonized the world very successfully, actually. In South Africa, only 6% of South Africans speak English as a first language. Now, many speak it as a second language. You're a case in point. It's not your first language, it's your second language. Or possibly your third. I'm not sure. Maybe that's your third one. But anyway, my point is that it's not your first language. But only 6% of South Africans speak as their first language. And while there's merit and legitimacy to saying that English is a key to success in the modern business world, in aviation, in coding, in science, technology, all that's true. The Dutch go to school learning in Dutch and learn English from a very young age as a second language, and they're proficient in both of them, but they learn in their first language. What astounds me is that Xhosa and Zulu and Venda and Tswana and the Basotho are not up in arms that their children are going to be forced to learn in an alien language when they start the first year or they go to primary school. They should be upset that the ANC has wasted 30 years not developing schools and qualified teachers who speak their language so the kids can learn. Because you already see how a lot of black kids are left behind right now because they go to schools where the English is the medium of instruction. The kids only speak Zulu. They've never spoken a word of English when they go to school. I don't understand the cognitive dissonance. Am I missing something? Am I completely wrong in this? It's not just Afrikaners who are concerned about their language, or maybe it is. They should all be, shouldn't they?
Well, I think your first fact is correct. I think people in this country, I think one of them will be Ronaldo, who took the brunt of saying that certain facts are based on race. Some of them are based actually on history, but a lot of it is based on culture. We are kind of sitting here and people bring up the race debate and I go, no, sir, I've been 32 years in the ANC culture. I was raised in Umtata. I grew up under the King Uzwelabanzi. I'm more of a traditionalist in Xhosa than what I'm a politician. I grew up there. We must start understanding that if Africa wants to mutate, Chris, into a global giant, a very good guy told me one day, if you can teach your children in mother tongue to continue the heritage of culture, that is a bonus. But if you don't teach your children English, and maybe in the future Mandarin, then you might not be a person that can communicate to world business. And I went, okay, English I get, Mandarin. He said, Neil, the power of Asia is coming. And that was said 12 years ago. So I don't think the choice of language is anymore to say that we've got to culturally look after just heritage and mother tongue. We've got to look at decisions that affect the future leaders, the future economists, because surely we don't just want South Africa to remain a rural state with enclaves of small cities. That's not it. So that will be a debate. But here's the thing. You must have choice. And that's what we are scratched about. Our choice is being taken away. And if government starts taking away, as you will know, Chris, matters that should be protected under the Constitution, if they can take away one, what else are they going to take away? So I think Bella Bill was it, yeah, but it was the touching of the nerve to what's going to come. And there's no opposition. And I think that's the second shock. The GNU, as it is finding itself in a very bad position where John Steenhuisen, Cyril Ramaphosa factually are the two bridge carriers, and you've got people behind them factually that either are supporting them in the minority but want to destroy them in the majority on both sides. So not a very good position to be in. But I have said, bar the GNU, the alternative, Chris, is a monster.
Well, I've said that all along, Neil, since the election. My analysis, of course, I'm going to crow again here. I've told people the first week after the November 2021 municipal elections that the ANC would do no better than 38 to 42% in the election last year. That's well in advance. And I stuck to that. People told me I was crazy. I didn't understand South African politics. What do I know? And I projected a number of factors. I couldn't anticipate Zuma forming MK, but it filled the same role that I thought other things were going to do. So my analysis came in right. But the point here is that it's very frustrating that people aren't paying attention to what's going on here. I don't know what South Africans have to do to wake up to this reality of what's going on here. But the Government of National Unity, after the election results came out, I said this is the best of the bad outcomes. The best. Hopefully the DA will be responsible and will get at least one or two ministries that have real tangible power. But then when I saw the outcome of that, and Ramaphosa and the ANC were actually kind of brilliant in drawing all these other parties in to give this a veneer of a grand coalition of Government of National Unity rather than just a coalition between the ANC and DA, which was highly unpalatable to many ANC members. So they wanted these other parties in there, and then they gave them ministries. And what happened is that the DA didn't get any of the security cluster. You and I both know how critical that is to governance. No police, no intelligence, no foreign ministry, no finance, none of the true levers of power that the government wields. The monopoly on force and things like that over the economy and over people. What they got was the things that were broken, home affairs, agriculture that needed to be fixed. And when I saw that, I became very concerned. But still, one could hope for this being the best because the other options aren't good. But I'm convinced that the ANC would not go into coalition with Zuma and MK, and they're unlikely to go into a coalition with Malema. So it's the best of the worst circumstances. But from what I've seen recently, if you supported the DA in this coalition, you got to be scratching your head. When will they stand up? They drew lines in the sand as an opposition party, and they said these things were important. Bella, and now NHI, and then EWC, and all of this is coming true. And all we see is John Steenhuisen saying, well, I've asked the president for a reset, and he didn't respond to my email. Okay, well, they were supposed to meet last night, finally. I wonder what came of that. I've seen nothing in the press. So what I'm saying here is it looks like, and I'm not picking on the DA, but they look like they've been castrated. I mean, that's my thoughts, Neil. Am I off base on this, or is any of this making any sense to you?
Chris, I've been through 2 GNUs, nearly 3. So I was part of the first discussions as a backbench military attaché at CODESA. You will remember CODESA was split into 3 as we sat in that meeting hall. We had the military conclave where we had Joe Modisa, Ronnie Casseros, Chris Hani, Steve Twete. We were that side. In the middle, you had the negotiating team. We called them the bureaucrats, Cyril and his circus. And then we had what we called the politicians. That was Mandela, Sisulu. And we sat like that. So on the other side of the National Party was a gentleman who just passed away, who took quite a bit with him, Dr. Neil Barnard, who was the head of NI. And then you had the military conclave, Rolf Meyer, etc. At that moment, there was then the decision for a GNU, a total different one. But it failed. It didn't last. Finally, the National Party over 2 years withdrew, and they folded into the ANC. That was the first round we had. The second one wasn't a GNU. It was a multi-party charter where it was gearing, as you know, you were in the middle of that. We were gearing up to take government, and that was the DA, the UIM, the Freedom Front, the IFP, etc. I was part of that leadership and played a pinnacle role many times to chair it. We were really looking at, but the question is, was everybody really thinking we could get 50+1? It became very clear at the end of that journey before the election that it wasn't so. And you will remember a couple of days before the election, I walked out of the multi-party charter and I resigned because it was not about the ANC. It wasn't about amalgamation. It was about bloody lies, skullduggery, and rubbish happening around us that we were not included. I don't play that game. And then the third GNU, it happened quite quick, I must tell you. It was like FSC was planned. And that came, and it's not a government of national unity. I wish they would stop that. And yeah, I might support Jacob Zuma. Stop saying it's a GNU. It's not a GNU. It is a coalition between the DA and the ANC. And they then decided to include those who Cyril said could come. And that's what we've got. So it's not a GNU. And that GNU needs to keep it together. And as John said, and he said it, every time something breaks, we have to take the line of stepping one more back, and forcing them back. And this is not going to stop, because I can tell you, I'm hot in it. It can't stop. And for the sake of this country's economy, for the sake of the world looking upon us, which they're already frowning, especially the new dude in town with you, we better start buckering up and swallowing it and stop trying to be a global power. We are not a global power, and that's why they murdered our soldiers in Congo, because we are putting our noses into places where we don't belong. We don't belong at the International Criminal Court to take on the world and be the peacekeeper. We cannot play peacekeeping role in any country because we've got enough trouble in our own country. Instead of pulling those army people back into my country and get rid of the gangs and all the dark side here, which we are losing. So here we go. It is just an epiphany of problems that we've got. And I'll tell you, Chris, this country needs a miracle. We are abused. And we've got a president in this country who needs to really finish his term. Look, I have gone from absolute admiration to his skills when he was the negotiator to, I must tell you, absolute spite, regret. And I'm starting to get to that point where I can't even listen to him. And that is not me, Chris. I'm an officer and a gentleman. I respect the rank if I don't like you. But now I don't even respect that. And you can see it.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at electoral outcomes and prospects, the ANC has consistently lost since they peaked at 69% of the electorate in parliament and representation. And they're at their lowest level ever, with amongst the lowest turnout of voters to begin with. So it's even worse than it looks. And the Democratic Alliance reached its zenith under Helen Zille well over a decade ago. They've been in decline everywhere since then. They could try to dress up their electoral results. Ooh, we brought 3.5 million votes. Well, the last time you brought 4,004,000. So where'd the 500,000 votes go to? Both of these parties, in my view, are acting as if they're the grand poobahs and nothing bad has happened. I see them as tone deaf to the voters and to the public. And I think the perfect example of this, not to beat the DA up, but to be clear about this, in the midst of this story about expropriation without compensation being signed into law, and then the DA saying we weren't even informed, the IFP was never informed, nobody told us, we found out by reading the press. I mean, first off, you might want to keep that to yourself and not admit that that's how unimportant you are in this coalition, and they deal with that privately. That's the first thing. That's just a little tip for politics there, DA. But second, people are hungry to hear what they're going to do. Are they going to leave the GNU? Are they going to demand this meeting? Are they going to follow the Freedom Front Plus in a Section 80 constitutional challenge to go to the Constitutional Court within 30 days, which is the best path to go? If you can get 4 more counselors, let's do that. But no, what do? Hello, we are here to tell you about our 2026 municipal election campaign as the Queen is looking down on high from Buckingham Palace. We have a special program if you are among the best and brightest to join the DA and run as a local councillor for us. Your CV submission date is the 1st of February. We will be the biggest party. What the hell is going on, Neil? People want to hear about EWC and what the DA is doing or not doing, and they're coming out there giving us a press conference. Look, they can do that press conference, but not have the senior leadership of the party, the federal chair, the party leader, Ivan Meyer, all these people. We were expecting something. I mean, this was, to quote Hillary Clinton, this was a nothing burger. This is tone deafness, and the ANC is no different. They think that they're going to claw back votes from MK and from the EFF, which they failed to do for 10 years. They're going to claw those votes back by signing legislation that the public, they think, is too dumb to know what's really going on. Look, it beggars the imagination, Neil. I don't get this. These are two parties that seem to care less about South Africa. In my view, and you've heard me say this phrase before, and especially during my campaign last year, unsuccessful running for the legislature, it's all about craving political power, self-aggrandizement, and self-enrichment. And that's what I see coming from both these parties. The DA may say they mean well, but I'm not seeing it. You can disagree. Here's your chance to respond.
Chris, many people don't understand. You do. What is battle strategy? Mm-hmm. It's funny. A guy told me the other day, "You're very OCD and you run meetings."
There's a reason for that. It's called efficiency and effectiveness.
I said I can't help it. When I go shopping, I attack the shopping center like a military strategy. When I do my washing in my shower, there's a lot to wash. I do a military strategy. I wash zone by zone. So, Chris, take that picture out of your mind.
Okay.
Please. What I'm saying is, the reason people that come out of some form of military conclave are to the most successful is because we're disciplined and we follow a strategic line. We have intelligence, counterintelligence, verified information, strategy. We understand KYE, know your enemy. We at least need to have countermeasures on every matter and introduce certain strategic things that will allow the enemy to be surprised. That's politics. So Chris, look at the UIM. I started in a garage with a budget of 40,000 Rand. I went to an election when you met me with 260,000 Rand. I got 3 councillors within 45 days, Joburg, Durban, and Cape Town. I went to a national election with 750,000 Rand, and we got 40,000 votes in our first national election. We needed 6 more. We would have been in there. So it's a little miracle. And we are growing. Chris, in the past 3 months, God knows why, he will tell me, this party has added a further 276,000 interested members. And I'll tell you why. The people feel lied to. They feel betrayed. They stood back. People told them that they were going to do this and that. They got the votes and then they turned. So simple. So now, realistically, I want you to forget about AfriForum, Solidariteit, my eie ma, Blitzkrieg 2, and the Fourth Reich. Forget about those guys. Let's talk about us that are in local government, provincial and national, because that's the reality. Here we are. So here's the question. What are we busy doing to ensure that the country goes into stabilization? In the military, you and the police, they tell you 3 things, Chris. Intervention, stabilization, normalization. Our country is definitely not stable at the moment. So we've got MK brewing with a thunderous preparing for 2026. This I can tell you. They are nabbing currently. I see Tudizama going in today for incitement of violence. That's a strategy. But here's the strategy. May I talk on the DA? Chris, what is the DA's strategy? So let me point out 5 things and you will go click. 1, what is their battle strategy? In other words, do they have a war room? 2, are they getting enough and sufficient intelligence from the other side to, in effect, what they're doing and prepare themselves for the countermeasure? Number 3, Chris, when the DA went into the GNU, and they are the bulk ministerial carriers, I don't know if you saw what happened. The majority of their leaders within the parliamentary segment, and their people that were in there would know, your Leon Schreiber, Seviwe, your Dean McPherson, your John, they moved out of parliament, actually. They moved out of the DA conclave in parliament. And suddenly, you have a major gap in leadership, and I'm not criticizing the people, I'm just saying the foremost leaders within the DA left the DA and became cabinet ministers under the president, which makes them not to speak. So who have you left in parliament, the 42, Chris, to now attack on your right-hand side, MK, and to still, as the DA, do onslaughts on the ANC? It's not happening. In other words, not enough.
Yeah, there's no opposition from the DA anymore. That's the point. Yeah.
And number 5, who's the wrecking ball? So you always need, and it's not Helen Zille, she's not in parliament.
Nope.
So who in parliament of the DA is the one that gets up and goes, hey, yo, move.
Yep.
And then gets told this and can fight and say to the rest of them, you might be speaking to our people in the GNU, but we are not going to stop giving you hell. We are not going to stop making you accountable. And that also, you can clearly see, man, in the eyes of the Freedom Front Plus, the PA, all of them, they have just gone silent.
Yep.
And that is one of the primary collapses of not the GNU, but the fight to give the GNU outside the ANC the power om hulle te donder. And that's why, Chris, they don't want me in parliament.
Yeah.
They can't have me in parliament because I am not an MK party man. I am a MK military veteran.
Yeah.
I am a 32-year inside ANC cadre. And now I hate them both. So they can't allow me to come in because they will have hell to pay. And that is just how it works. We don't have people in there that have the balls and the guts, sorry, Chris, to annihilate them. And until that voice doesn't come out, we will still sit every day where the DA is going to sit to try and keep this bridge going, but where the ANC can go ahead and shit, sorry, where they want to, and think that they are still a 60%er.
Yeah, and that's how they behave. They act as if they're 60%er, and the DA acts as if it's like watching Oliver Twist. Please, sir, more soup, sir. They just are happy to get the scraps from the bowl. You could say a wrecking ball. In the vernacular here, we'd say a pit bull. There's no pit bull out there that's holding the line. So I need to address something in the chat very quickly here, Neil. So, for those who are new to the program watching this, thanks for tuning in. You are listening to a conversation with UIM, United Independent Movement's President Neil de Beer. I'm Colonel Chris Wyatt here in Pennsylvania. Neil is in Cape Town, I believe, at the moment. That's where you usually find him, the Cape Town metropolitan area. And so thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber, please join us. And thank you if you just found the channel, courtesy of recent videos. But I do want to address something. Now, I do speak multiple languages, and I understand others. Ik praat niet Afrikaans nie, maar ik verstaan. And the reason I tell you that ek verstaan is because I'm seeing comments in the chat. Now, let me address this very quickly here. Again, as I started at the outset of this video, there are people in South Africa who love Neil de Beer. A lot of color folks love Neil. They really do. That's been my experience. Speaking of folks in the chat, I see that Fatima Abdul has just joined us. She's a UIM counselor up there in Gauteng. Welcome, Fatima. And a former soapy star. One of the people I used to watch when I was learning Afrikaans, watching South African television back in the day. We won't say how long ago that was, Fatima, to protect both of our identities and our ages. But a lot of people hate Neil because he betrayed the National Party and the struggle, or the government when he was a police officer and in the military. And then a lot of ANC people hate him because he betrayed the ANC. Listen, folks, you can love him, you can hate him, you can leave him, whatever. Neil de Beer, and I'm not saying this because he's on camera, and I've said it off camera, he's newsworthy because people are interested. Look at this. This is the largest live stream I have had in donkey years, even with Neil on here in the past. Now, some of this is because people have been coming and finding the channel recently, and maybe they're trying to see what's going on here. You don't have to like what Neil is saying. You don't even have to respect it. You don't have to be here if you don't like it. I thank you for those who are here. I appreciate being here. But, there's no need to go and chat and say, Neil betrayed us. Yeah, okay, we've heard that story before. Neil's wonderful. You can say that if you want, but it really doesn't help. If you've got a question, I'll do my best to bring it in. There were a couple questions, Neil, I want to get to because Brett did a couple super chats here, and we appreciate the revenue. He asked why the history of land theft is not taught properly in South Africa. Well, Neil can answer, but it's political. That's why. They don't want to tell the truth. Why are the Khoisan and coloreds omitted from this? What's the UIM? Okay, this you can answer. What's the UIM's stance on property, land history? Okay, and then your position. For some reason, he wants to know what you think about the four-tracker monument. I think I know the answer to both of those, but I'll give you a chance. What's the UIM's position on the history of land in South Africa? Because we hear very different things. I've recently criticized Gate McKenzie for his comment about, well, not all white people stole land. I mean, that's just race hustling in my book. I mean, I'm not picking on Gate, but what's the UIM's position on land history, and then the four-tracker monument, which is a private facility. It's not owned by the government. Anyway, over to you, Neil.
Chris, you have to have quite a serious level of IQ if a person wants to realistically sit around a table and debate history. You either read history because you have to, or you read it because you have a concise passion for the past. I'm one of them. I have got my best marks always in history and my worst in maths. That's why I went to go do agriculture, because I can't count. History and land is history. Every country like the US, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Africa has a huge history in land. Chris, in the olden days, land was bigger in the sense of debate. May I say than what it is today? So when we, today in the 20th century, sit and speak about history of land, and now, where are we and what are we going to do with land? 5 facts. The biggest landowner in the Republic of South Africa is the current government of South Africa. They own it. They've owned it since 1994. This is 31 years ago. 31 years. That's point 1. Point 2, the restitution of land and land claims has also been alive since 1995. Point 3, the people that have the original restitutional claims have passed away and are now being followed by the families of the actual claimants. Number 4, the majority of land within the current urban areas can no longer be claimed as they have been developed. And that is no more a lands claim, but a financial claim. Number 5, here's the most important, Chris. When a person comes and says he wants to have his land, the new age thinking is, what are you going to do with land? Because 100 years ago, when you showed people with your kiri the vast amounts of land you are, if you now are Jan, if you are Steven, Sipu, or Oko, you showed and you said, "Hierdie is my land." The modern thinking is no more about hierdie is my land. The new thinking is, kyk wat het ek geplant op my land. In other words, the modern thinker wants to look at a picture that you've got on your screen at the back. It is now more vital as a productive globe, as an economic globe, If you get 100 hectares of land, are you using it to the optimum? So the argument is the UIM unilaterally understands the rights of landowners, understands the prolific history in my country of the de-ownership of land. You must be dumb not knowing it, but we are 100% in the support that if we take land, transfer land, be it land or equity, that you should show what you will do economically with land. Because here's it, and I've been in it, Chris. What happens is the Koko family gets their land, and a month later, they sell the land. And whom do they sell it to? To the same farmer who was dispossessed of their land. No, this is fact. The other thing, Chris, is there are more than 4,000 farms. 4,000.
In the government's hands.
The Republic South Africa that was bought from white ownership and transferred to trusts of communities. They are now bankrupt.
Yep.
And the other thing is, we've got to sit back and say, now that you know, that we look at people like the Khoi, the San, the First Nation, the Garib, the Xhosa, when you look at them, one of the people who is vehemently now fighting and protesting with the GNU against land without compensation, funny, is the Zulu nation.
Because the Inganyama Trust.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because they own and negotiated one of the biggest land trusts in the country. So again, it's not a white thing. It's not a Zulu thing. It's not a Khoisan thing. It is a heritage thing that needs to be addressed. And this ANC government failed. They failed, one, to really register the people that have right of ownership. And until that hasn't been done, stop saying the white man.
Yep.
Stop saying the brown man.
Just say
the ANC man.
Say
because we have not been in power for 30 years. Jy praat mos nou nonsense. And that must stop, Chris. 100%. Because the real right owner is this government.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Neil. On April 7th of 2018, I published an article back in the day when LinkedIn was relevant, before it became a Microsoft dinosaur. And in my article, talking about land and poverty in South Africa, these are questions I asked nearly 6 years ago. Who wants the land? What do people want the land for? What is its intended purpose? I think you just said that. Where would claimants like to own land? Is it urban? Is it rural? And then I also had, what are the plans are there for agricultural support, extension services, vocational training, and skills training? And is there a partnership plan for fixing this issue together with landowners, farmers, and government, provincial and national? These are questions I asked 6 years ago, and they're just as relevant today as they were then. And there's many other things in this article. But, you know, like, let me just say who wants the land. The rabid, and this is what I wrote, the rabid and emotional narrative in current discourse is caustic and racial. Neither is helpful to the dispossessed, the innocent, or South Africa's reputation. It's unlikely that 43 million black residents of South Africa want to own land or have any use for land. The discussion of black land is disingenuous. There are at least 5 million non-South African blacks living in the country. They have no legitimate claim to the land. It's also racist and treats people based on the color of their skin, ignoring the reality that everyone is of African origin. That's just some of what I wrote in that 6 years ago, and it remains just as accurate today as it was then. And I actually, in that article, I put forth suggestions on what could be done and how we could solve the issue, and also addressed this whole point about the 1995 to 99 window in which 75,000 plus land claims were filed, and over 74,000 were resolved over 20 years ago, most with financial compensation. And we can argue whether it was fair compensation. That's a legitimate discussion. But the point is that they accepted it. And that was a very generous program. You didn't have to be the person who was dispossessed. Your parents, your grandparents could have been from 1910 forward. As long as you could prove that, and if they weren't around anymore, you could get some compensation or get land from it. So the whole thing about land is so disingenuous, so dishonest, and it's just tied up in the phrase I use all the time, race hustling. People constantly using race. Look, Neil, I don't think it's fair. You and I were cheated. We got robbed on skin pigmentation, and you know, as a consequence, ultraviolet radiation is quite cruel to us when we walk outside. So I don't think that we should be punished because of the color of our skin. again, I say that a little bit in tongue in cheek, but it's ridiculous. We need to address this as an issue in a way that benefits South Africa and existing property owners. When you abrogate private property rights, you destroy a country. Peru came back from the brink of extinction as a country because they respected property rights and transferred title deed on land that peasants were living on to them. If the South African government today would transfer the RDP houses and the plot that they're on to the current residents who occupy those houses, billions of dollars in dead capital become available instantaneously. But the government won't do that because they want those people dependent on the government and beholden to the government. Do you agree or disagree? Mandela. Madiba. What about him?
You see, they say here the white Afrikaner verkrampte that they don't like me. They hate me. Those men saved their lives. I will tell you that clear. Those men saved their lives. I sat there when this man had a revolution in the ANC because they told him you are too kind to the whites. The white people in this country that still fight me, you're a racist. You can't not be a racist if you hate me, and if you say that I sold you out, you're a racist. And then you are not my family, you are not part of me. Go to hell. You are a dying breed in this country, and you're not even a million. So I don't recognize them. There are people that in this country have now decided, I have seen the emails in the past 3 weeks, that I am not that bad. People that have asked to be unblocked because now suddenly I am the voice of the minorities in this country. I am the only voice. And when I say I'm talking the UIM. The UIM did not go to the GNU. The UIM warned them. The UIM stood 18,000 kilometers, Chris, on every salt box, out box, in-house, outhouse. And we told them that Africa is coming to this country. And they said, what is that? I said, when you go to Africa, my friend, and you've been to Accra, Ghana, Lusaka, Nairobi, and you've been to Maputo, and you've traveled Harare, Africa, then go look at what happens. Do you know how much power, Chris, it must take for a piece of grass to break through a sidewalk of concrete? When you walk in a city and you see cracks in concrete and you see plants coming through it, wow, Chris, what lack of maintenance, because it took some time. And a good friend told me, the day that you see plants cracking concrete is the day that modernization, evolution has ceased to exist. Well, Joburg, Pretoria, East London, Durban, the only one I'll tell you that's left is Cape Town. Packed. But we're losing the battle here because we're being swamped. So, Chris, die vertragtes that are still sitting there, that have decided that they will continue praying for a racial segregation, good luck. But I am not. I am a South African. I have to look after black South Africans, colored South Africans, white South Africans, and Indian South Africans. I have constantly fought for that. I won't change. The fact that we've got a grouping that said they would and failed is a fact. So what do we do? Well, the only hope we've got, Chris, is to stay, ask Fatima. We are not a political party that's radical, Chris. Mm-hmm. If you want to know what is the UIM, it is a moderate and, yes, conservative party, not moderate liberal. What meaning conservative? No, not Kapia and Hitler and Rechts. No. We believe in conservative values, Chris. Respect, dignity, manners maketh man. And if we can't bring that back to society, well, you've been rumped with it now with Trump. That's his philosophy.
Trump is taking no prisoners, Neil.
As mad as what people want to be. We love to be people with manners, Chris.
Trump is taking no prisoners. It's very different than this first time around. So very quickly, back to what you're talking about. There's I think it's a Twitter account that shows the decline, destruction of Joburg. And it's not like, when you go to Harare and you show photographs of 1965 and 1970, what Harare looked like with the jacarandas and the clean streets and no rubbish and functioning cars and lights. It's not that. It's Johannesburg in 2018, 2015, and in 2025. The complete collapse. I mean, streets and sidewalks and bricks stolen and just completely falling apart. And I did a story yesterday about a place up in Limpopo, in Petersburg or Polokwane, an abattoir, a butchery shop, not an abattoir, but a butcher shop that a woman built as a business over 30 years, employed 26 people, had side businesses, was making all kinds of money. And because the rubbish was never removed, because the electricity was episodic, because the water was off for days on end, she had to shut down. And then she had to pay back service fees, the rates for services she never received in order to sell the property. And so she lost all her money and she's destitute as a 65-year-old widower. This is what they've done to South Africa, to black, white, and brown. It doesn't matter where you're from or who you are. It's just that the politicians, particularly the ANC, but not exclusively, love to focus on race, to blame other people for their failures. And that's what's been going on here for so long. And that's the page that needs to be turned. The UIM, and I'm not shilling for your party, the UIM, I've never heard your party focus on race. You focus on South Africans and on people. And that's one of the reasons why I was happy to cover your events and see where you were going with this. But let me shift track a little bit here, because I think we need to talk about this before we wrap up today, although we could talk for hours, but you probably need some rest here. But before we get to that stage, I want to say, I did a video recently and I analyzed what's going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Of course, South Africa has been involved there for the better part of 2 decades plus. And this conflict has gone on forever. They went in late 2023, authorized in May of 2023, went in December 2023 as part of a SADC mission into the Congo. This is not the first time that South Africa's deployed on peacekeeping or peacemaking. They went to Comoros twice under SADC umbrella. They went into Lesotho in Operation Boleas twice in the 1990s to their first couple of peacekeeping missions. They've done things like this in the past. So I'm not questioning from that standpoint, but I'm questioning from the standpoint that it's not a mutual defense thing. Why are they there? This conflict has been raging for 30 years. The troops are under-equipped. They're poorly trained. I've seen the videos of the lack of fire discipline from the SANDF troops. It's horrible what they're doing up there and being put in risk way. Now we've had 13 soldiers die in the recent firefight and mortar attack. 9 died in August of last year. So we're talking over 20 soldiers plus another 18 were wounded in this. And we have a minister who pushed a 30% standard for education for 16 years, and now it's a defense minister. I don't understand. Well, I understand why. It's politics. But if you're going to make someone the defense minister and your choice is between Bantu Holomisa and Angie Mocheka, that's pretty simple for me. It's Bantu Holomisa. I mean, but that's not the situation. So, I mean, people are speculating why they're there. The only advantage I can see to being there is that it props up the ANC's ego that they're the preeminent peacemaker and negotiator and political influencer on the continent of Africa. But I see it very differently, Neil. At this stage, after 30 years of ANC conduct across the country, sticking their nose in the business of Cote d'Ivoire and sticking their nose in Burundi and in Eritrea and everywhere else on the continent of DRC, I see South Africa under the ANC as Africa's sole indigenous neo-colonial interloper. What say you?
I think it's deeper than this. I was there. I was at Goma. I entered Goma from the Sudan side when South and North Sudan split. There's a multiple amount of players in East Africa. One of them, which people are currently misjudging, is a very astute man. They call him the grand uncle of the East. His name is Museveni, the president of Uganda. So people say that Kagame is the right guy. Kagame is not. Museveni carries the power. It is then surrounded by Rwanda, it is Burundi, it is CAR, Sudan, and top Congo. The battle in Goma and the base Sake is right in the intertwined area where we had the Rwandan forces at one stage, the split between the Tutsis and the Hutus, raveling and running across the border to establish themselves there and became M23. Their profound leader, the then Bosco Nataranga, we found him to such pressure that he surrendered to the Den Haag. But there was the new group. That fight is not about strategic occupation. It is about mineral wealth. And that's it. So we can dress this zebra purple if you want to, but when it washes off, it's black and white. So let's make that a point. Secondly, we are not the United Nations of Africa. We are not the US, and we're definitely not China. We cannot do such operations. We are not prepared for it. We went there to keep peace. Peace for whom? We didn't even know. And the red flag should have come when we formed a SADC peace force, and only 2 countries joined us, Tanzania and Malawi, and both of them ran away. So what we've got now is this social media. I mean, Chris, I don't have data left in the day of the amount of videos that are being 98 videos an hour. And it doesn't make it better, because I delivered, as you know, a 24 question paper in the hands of the Secretariat of the Minister of Defense yesterday. On Biz News, I will read every one of them. What was your command strategy? What was your operational mandate? What was your logistical support plan? What was the decision on the buffering of artillery support? What was your air support in? Blah, blah, blah. The normal things, Chris, that you do before you bloody march into a bush. And this was not done. And plain and simple, now they are killing each other in the media. And the latest is the president of Rwanda on X, like Trump, tweeted at 12, saying some sporadic stuff. And of all of them, 2 that amazed me. He says he spoke to Cyril, and Cyril said it's not M23 that killed the South Africans. What? It's on paper. It's on my tweet. And then he says, and Cyril, we can talk about this, but if you want conflict, aka war, then we will give it to you. Boom. For the first time in 30 years of this country's total history, a commander-in-chief is now being threatened by a foreign force.
And not by America, Britain, or Australia.
No,
by another African.
Rwanda. No, Rwanda.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, here's the point. They've killed 13 of us. Doesn't matter who killed them. You killed them. So here we sit, and we are trying to play peacemaker. There is no more peace. You take 13 of us, we should take 1,300 of you. You should have entered that theater with every bomb and every aircraft and bring down hellfire. And that is how the strategy should be. You know it. Once you are being overrun and there's a bloody broken arrow, you don't care about casualty. Now, we took this knock on the nose, the SANDF standing back, the absolute rubbish coming out of there, non-supply, bad ammo, no air support, is just an annihilation of a force. So, my opinion, either bolster and wipe them out, or withdraw and come back home. That's it, Chris.
Yeah.
And we've got command structures that cannot have the balls to do that. He wants to talk. The time for talk is over. You threatened us, and we will need to muster. And lastly, Chris, let me tell you something. There are too many generals in this country.
400.
We are running out of brass epaulets. So many are there. And yesterday, the cherry on the cake is to actually receive a picture of our current head of the Defense Force wearing a special force beret, but worse, he was given a special force badge, an operator's badge, and fake honorary Carabat wings.
Yep.
Now, hear me well. I worked with those heroes. I worked with the operators of this country. There is no more heralded officer or fighting soldier in this country than a special force operator. I know them, and I know they are men of honor. Can you bloody imagine that a man is standing there as head of the military and he's got 2 honorary badges that they died and absolutely blood sweated? This is a disgrace. So I said the only way to remedy that is to invite that general with the operator's badge and wings to a one jump and to take him up because he has wings, and then to push him out and tell him to do the roll when he hits and bends his knees in the right direction. It's a travesty of circus. It is ridiculous. That was now the cherry on the cake of this clown. Yeah. So it's like, sorry, Chris, a man comes on your show, he is the head of a battalion, and he's wearing Navy SEAL badges. And someone says, where did you do it? And when did you do buds? And when did you cycle? And the guy says, no, I became the commanding officer of the SEAL teams, and they gave me a badge. Would you accept that?
No, it's stolen valor. I think he watched a few.
Stolen valor.
He went a few too many nightclubs, and he saw that logo. It says Red Bull gives you wings, apparently. So he thought he could practice a parachute landing for him.
Sorry.
Yeah,
what else is fake?
Yeah, exactly. If he fakes that, what else about his fake? Probably all his qualifications. Probably everything about the guy's fake. So let me address something very quickly here, unrelated to it. Then let me come back to the military. No, it's okay. Let me come back to the military. So there's a gentleman here, or a lady, I don't know, Scrooby Noob, who says, Colonel Wyatt, why was a U.S. military chopper near a commercial airliner landing path with his transponder off? Whiskey Tango Hotel. What the hell? Okay, first off, you need to understand that a lot of the speculation and rumors being spread and misreported information from last night. First off, we were told there were 4 survivors, which is implausible given the fireball of a mid-air collision between those 2 aircraft. Anyway, so there were no survivors. So that was the first thing to die in combat is truth. The first thing to die in an aviation accident is the truth. Give it time for the investigation. I will tell you that you're mistaken, that it was falsely misreported that the transponder wasn't on. In fact, it was on. Otherwise, we would not have been able to identify it on things like FlightAware and tracking services. So it was on. Second, it wasn't flying in a commercial airliner landing path. It was flying in an authorized air zone for that aircraft. Those helicopters fly that path all the time, down along the Potomac. They go inside the barrier island, come by Fort McNair, and down by Bowling Airfield. The question has nothing to do with the flight path. Both the commercial airliner and the military aircraft were in authorized flight paths. I know this. I have a pilot who follows my show, who flies those flight paths. I was based at Bowling Air Force Base. I've flown in commercial aircraft and military aircraft in those flight paths. Those are authorized. The question is, what happened with the altitude? What was going on? Were there night vision devices involved because it was a night annual training requirement? There was a grievous error here. We don't know if it's ATC communication. I'm not going to get into that right now. Go watch my previous broadcast. You'll hear more about that, and I'll talk more about that in the coming days we learn. But this should not have happened. Visibility was almost endless last night. There was virtually no wind, no issues here. The tower communications are working. The pilots were alive. They had thousands of hours of time in the air. They were experienced. This should not happen. This is the hubris of humanity. We take things for granted at times and make mistakes. Okay, let me get back to, I just want to address that. Let me get back to the military. So for years, people like Helmut Heitman and myself and other analysts, Peter Fabricius, I think, has also weighed in on this, have talked about the decline of South Africa's military. And you can see it in the overstretching of the force, sending them to Burundi, sending them to Eritrea, to the Congo, deployments on the border. At one time, it used to be 7 infantry companies were actively patrolling the border between Zimbabwe and Mozambique. And for years, I don't know if they can even maintain that anymore. Bite Bridge always had a military infantry company around there. So the military's been overtaxed. They've been underfunded. This past year in the budget, South Africa set aside 0.74% of its GDP for its military, a force of 60,000 troops and plus pensioners they got to pay for. That is ridiculous. You can't even maintain a professional force that you inherited that's functional with such an abysmal level. Look at the German military. They're struggling mightily because they get about 0.9% of their GDP. If you have a healthy force that's functioning, it's trained, it's equipped, and you have good leadership that's steady state, and you take over that force, you must spend 2.5 to 2.8% minimum of your GDP to maintain a force the size of South Africa has. And that has not been the case for over 20 years. It's a miracle that soldiers even know what a uniform looks like. And I saw the fire discipline in Goma. It's clear that those soldiers lack training. I don't care how often we try to dress this up and go, well, look, we had a naval exercise with the Chinese and Russians. It ain't happening. There's only one qualified Gripen fighter. There's only 2 Gripens that are even operational to my knowledge. None of the ships ever make it out. Occasionally, I saw one at Durban go out about 3 kilometers and turn around and come back just so they get sea pay. And then none of the Type 209 submarines go to sea. The Army hasn't got a prime mover in decades. The Ruifalks are older than you and I combined at this stage. I'm being facetious, but you get my point. The Oryxes are on their last leg, although they've been really good workhorse for the military. This underinvestment in the military has been detrimental. And on top of that, in the early part of this century, the ANC decided to use the SANDF as a jobs program for unemployed black soldiers, and in bringing them in under a skills development program, which didn't bring soldiers in. It took people and gave them jobs where they're doing nothing. You cannot have a healthy military force when the average age of your rifle soldier is 38 to 45. And that's what we have as a consequence of what's going on in the SANDF. Look, it starts with money, Neil, and it goes from there with leadership. You get what you invest in, or you don't invest in. Look at South Africa's infrastructure. Instead of keeping the rails running, they didn't maintain law and order. The rails have been robbed and pilfered. The roads are potholed. The ports are a disaster. Worst performing ports on the planet, because instead of putting the money back into it, they stole it all. And the military is in this mess, not because of Enzima Cheka. I have no respect for her whatsoever, but not because of her, but because of 31 years of negligence. What say you?
If you go to a zoo and there's a male lion, and you throw the male lion 1,000 rand in cash, you really think this lion is going to have an appetite for your money? It's a lion. But if you threw him half a springbok, it would tear it apart, knowing exactly what to do with it. The analogy is, Chris, you can throw billions to a person that has no tinkling idea what to do with it. So we have got people that are not at all schooled. They carry rank. The majority of them are ex-liberation fighters. They were not trained like I was, like you were, and the majority of 50-year-old white people sitting here. They were trained as a conventional force. We were trained as a conventional military, but that could adapt to bush warfare. So the problem that you've got is the understanding that when you go back to bush warfare, you don't deviate from conventional systems. You still use your infantry, you still use your artillery, you still use your intelligence probes and your air force. But the most important thing, like you know, Napoleon Bonaparte said it, no military can fight away from water and food. So if you've got food and water with you, you can fight. Apparently, they didn't even have that. So the problem we've got is that, I'm going to say it, you will have to mute it later. We had a military term in my country. It's called a clusterfuck. And when that happens, either a grenade or a mortar, you take that cluster, you get mad for 1 minute and 2 seconds, and then instinct gets up and you fight. Now, I saw in one of the videos a guy with an LMG with North Star tackies and jeans and a t-shirt with a bulletproof vest firing at an enemy. What was he doing in civilian clothing? Fighting with an LMG. I'll tell you what he was doing. They experienced a clusterfuck. They had such a surprise that they were sitting there probably in underpants. Because may I ask a question? How does a force of 100, 200, or 300 rebels get it right to enter your buffer zone and you don't know? How? That means only three things. You had no recce team that was out there doing recce reconnaissance patrols. You had no vision using drones or Air Force to patrol. And thirdly, you have no military intelligence. I hear absolutely a lie. I hear they allowed women to come into the Saki base. And they brought water, cool drinks, and food. They let them come in. They took their stuff and they let them go. This is weeks prior to last week's Doomsday, Thursday. Now, Chris, if that's true,
Recon.
this is a break of intelligence.
Yeah, it's a recon. Yep.
So, sorry, every story I hear is sad to me. Everything you are hearing is terrible because you are a professional. I will leave this to the big minds and military strategists. But at the end of the day, when you have now shaken this milkshake and the ice cream is at the bottom, people are dying, and they're not dying one a month. They are now dying tens a week. So, with surprise, the Defence Force Standing Committee was cancelled today, and they had to move it to next week.
Did they have a golf tournament?
Yes, where the Air Force was. And here's the last thing I posted on Twitter for tweets. The president of this country, in his military uniform, at COVID, when he came out in his battle fatigues to address the army who was now going to be deployed in our country to fight COVID. That apparently didn't take a minute. So, Mr. Ramaphosa, are you going to get again into your battle fatigue and go to Goma? Because you were quickly to come and attack COVID, but now it's bullets, bombs, and planes. I wrote you a Twitter on that matter. And that's that.
Well, look, it's a tough fight. I mean, Cyril's busy fighting vaccine apartheid from those evil white people who developed the jabs, so, I mean, we got to keep that in mind. We'll get to one last topic here in a second. There's a point over here about why are no journalists reporting this? I'll tell you why. Have you been to the DRC? Neil's been there. It's a crap hole. It's not a pleasant place to be. It's not a safe place to be. And not many people want to be in combat zones. And there's no reward for it because most journalists today aren't real journalists. They don't go in the field. I go when I can and where I can. I mean, I've been on the ground, like for South Africa's elections and reporting in places, but I'm not a war correspondent because I don't work for a media outlet. I work for myself. But it's not being reported because nobody cares. I've been talking about the South African National Defense Force and its decline for ages. But no one cares. I mean, I get like 30 people show up for a live stream or 400 will watch the video and analyze. And then years later, when something bad happens, suddenly we care. Here's the most tragic and disgraceful thing and why members of the South African government should be sacked and general officers should be sacked in the military. There was no adequate medevac to get people wounded to a level 1 trauma center. The golden hour is the most important period of time after a soldier's been wounded to get them out of a combat zone, triage them and get them to a trauma center or a field hospital so their life can be saved. It's called the golden hour. Sometimes for some people it's 5 minutes, but it's usually within an hour. If you get a soldier wounded in combat, no matter how grievous the injury, unless their head is blown apart or something like that, or they got a sucking chest wound, they will likely survive if you get them to that care center within 1 hour. That's impossible. These guys were laying around not being treated for hours. It's horrific. And this is unconscionable. You don't put soldiers in harm's way like that unless you're an unorganized militia or a bunch of guerrillas or rebels. You just simply don't do that. And South Africa lacks the resources. No medevac helicopters. They had no deal with the United Nations to provide that. The list of cock-ups here is unbelievable. All right, so Neil, I know people want solutions. I'm not going to give you a chance here, so I'm going to give a quick solution. You want solutions, South Africa? Then get on the phone, get on the email, go stand at the political parties that are part of the Government National Unity, particularly the Democratic Alliance, the Freedom Front Plus, the Patriotic Alliance, and then outside their action to say, and tell them to get off their ass and get 132 members of parliament to sign a letter to go to the Constitutional Court before the 30-day period runs out to end expropriation of the compensation. You draw that line in the sand. You get the Constitutional Court to step up or shut up. and prove it's a legitimate court or it's just a bought and paid for organization. I don't think that's the case yet. And then expropriation without compensation is declared unconstitutional. You've drawn the line in the sand. The ANC will be chastised, hopefully, and maybe you can return to some normalcy. That's step one. Just a second. But I want to shift. Well, let me finish that. So that's your responsibility. You, 63 million South Africans and 7 million illegal aliens, have agency. Well, they don't. The 7 million, they need to go somewhere else. But you have agency. And if you don't engage with your politicians, if you just simply whinge and moan and whine about it, then it doesn't change. Because clearly there's no incentive for them to change. They're going along this path of destruction, regardless of what you think. So engage. Use your agency. That's number one. Number two. You've got to participate. You've got to get involved here. And then I want to shift here real quick, Neil, because if you want to jump in as I get to the next topic before we wrap up, you're welcome to do that on that point. But that could take hours to say how we fix this mess. But I did want to shift attention to get your thoughts. There's a new sheriff in town, and he's taking no prisoners. And, if I just did a video, which is doing incredibly well, thank you for all the people watching it right now. But in the video, I made the point that, the new acronym now is fuck around, find out. And there's a good reason for fuck around, find out, because you fuck with the bull, you get the horns, as we say in American vernacular. And Donald Trump isn't playing games. We loaded criminal alien invaders onto military aircraft, C-17. And those aircraft, before they left the ground in the United States, had a flight plan and they had overflight clearance and country landing clearances, which were all coordinated through every country they flew over en route to Colombia, and had approval from the Colombian authorities before they even left the United States. They wouldn't have gotten the air without that. They flew down there, and the public doesn't know this, and en route, the Colombian president thought he'd be clever. No, you can't come here. No, we're not taking these people. You're very insulting to... That sounds like a Chinese accent, not a Latin American one. Anyway, the point is that I'm very bad with accents. The point is that Gustavo Petro said, no, you can't land here. It was all for attention. Well, Donald Trump was on the golf course with Shabir Sheikh, I think that's where he's at. He was on the golf course, and he got the word, and he sent a message out right then and there. 25% tariffs, suspend all visas for diplomats from Colombia, block all incoming visa holders. Wow. And within an hour, Colombia backed down. The point I'm making here is that the South African government is doing things contrary to the national security interests of the United States, whether it's Russia or Israel, take your pick, the list goes on and on. And it's also doing things contrary to the interests of South Africans, which we have an interest in. We extend Africa growth and opportunity, duty-free access to our market if you have good governance and you agree to abide by it. And amongst that is respect for property rights. Expropriation without compensation as a law invalidates participation. And if somebody gets the ear of Donald Trump for 5 minutes, South Africa's in a world of hurt. If you think that Donald Trump is messing around this time around, you are going to learn the hard way. So what do you think? New sheriff in town, good news, bad news for South Africa, good news, bad news for South Africans. Neil, you have the floor, my friend.
I'm a Trump man, so sorry, I'm a bit biased. I don't like all the things he does, but there's a quarter of that man that I will always support. He's not a person that tells you what he does. He does what he tells you. So when he tells you, I'm going to do this, you must be damn sure he's going to do it. He annihilated Biden's 4-year presidency in 4 hours. He wrote 73 executive orders and then he went to bed. This is not a person that you mess around with. Now, you can like him or don't like him. Like you don't like me, you've never met me. So you're just talking cuck. When you meet me, I think you'd like me. But I've got this persona that I've got to be strong out there for the people that do stand behind me. And there are thousands. We need a Trump here. We need a Trump. We don't need a Trump. We need a South African that is non-racist, economically inclined, makes decisive decisions, has the balls, and is not at all fearing anybody, but would do everything to make America great. And what we need is someone in South Africa to make South Africa great again. The problem is we can't while we have this political dispensation. You don't vote for a man like you do. We vote for a party. They then vote for the president. So until we don't have constitutional reform, which the UIM has been screaming for the past 5 years, if we don't have direct elective decision of who leadership are, and if we don't have the right to fire who we need to, then this country, I am sorry to say, is on a path of destruction. How do you go pussyfoot with Russia, BRICS, and China, and basically, like Cyril did a couple of months ago, on a stage insult Donald Trump? That was his Mugabe moment. Well, you are now going to find out the power that that country wields in the world. And this is the thing that is nonsensical to me, is, again, what kind of leadership do we have? The hope is that, and I'll say it again, that John and the DA, whoever they are, because they are there, will get hurtful to the point. But here's the fact, the DA cannot leave the GNU. It can't, Chris. Like it or not, I am not big enough. I'm not even a bloody 1%. The reality is when Helen Zille says, and you can now rip your head out, when she says there are only two parties that can do this, it is the ANC and the DA. She's not lying. It's fact. This is fact. But the third one is coming, because we forget that the third largest party now in this government is MK. So that might change. And the only way it will change is two ways. December 2027 is when the first shots will be fired. Is when we might find ourselves that Paul Mashatile or Mr. Lesufi, or heaven forbid, Mr. Fraki Pekile Dunfira becomes president.
Yeah.
Or the worst is that Paul Mashatile becomes president and Lesufi vice president. Because the man that does, CR is gone and MK is in and GNU over. This is what we are facing. 2026 is DA conference. Fact. Now people are screaming for the head of John Steenhuisen. You are mad. You are mad. He's in the negotiation. That's like taking out Roosevelt and removing Churchill and telling Stalin is not. Those people were there. They weren't nice, but they were the team. So we can't pull out and fire, destroy, whack. This has got to settle like a good jelly, like it or not, Roy of Groen. And I don't like it always. You know I don't. But you can see in my demeanor, my IQ is killing my EQ. I have to have a brain and a calm brain because I have a voice in this country, believe it or not. Sometimes I underestimate it, apparently. So I fight in the city. I fight for law enforcement. We are going through a rough time in Cape Town. We are having sporadic political attacks, and it is happening for 2026 because it's heating up. But I'm not worried about tomorrow. I want to have everything intact. And yeah, I told you that I am frustrated that I'm not in Parliament. I am frustrated that I didn't get in because I needed to get into the meat and potatoes. I'm but a commentator outside. Like, for example, these attacks that I want to launch on this Ministry of Defense, I had to write an outside letter and hand it in. If I was in Parliament, I would rip them to shreds. And I don't know, Chris, that's probably the destiny, but it's frustrating to me. But we fight on. A luta continua. We will not stop. We will continue. And we have a great country, just very bad management, Chris.
Well, Neil, I would say that South Africa is in a similar boat to the U.S., except just a little further gone. Our country was rapidly descending down into oblivion, but we had a chance to save it, and we did. in November. Now we just got to execute, and we're trying to execute that right now. Hopefully South Africans can save their country. It's look, you've got a painting back there behind you of someone rather famous, not Madiba, but Winston Churchill. And you were talking about fighting, and it reminded me, we will fight on the beaches. We will fight in the cities and towns. Give us the tools. And we will deliver. Sound like Winston Churchill there. But so Neil. Okay.
Chris, he said, you don't negotiate with a tiger when your head is in his mouth.
That's South Africa right now, that's for sure. All right, so Neil, look, we could go for hours, and I want to respect your health. You've been very kind. It's been a while since we had a chance to chat. This has been an epic broadcast of people tuning in. We've had, I think, close to just over 1,000 concurrent live viewers. That's awesome. Thank you all for being here. If you're not a subscriber, please become one. You can find Neil by following the news. Also, you can go to the United Independent Movement's websites and check that out. Neil, you still tweeting up a storm, or what's going on over there? You busy on Twitter?
Yeah, that's now my new platform to bitch and moan.
And also, you'll find him every week. I think Sundays when they usually release it on the Biz News and the topics of the day. So, Neil, with that, I always give my viewer or my viewers, my guests, a chance to say any final words, maybe some thoughts of hope. And I just want to thank you, Kea Laboa, Bye Bye Donkey. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program, and thanks for your insights today. And it's for me. It's not really an interview. That's why I call it the Indaba conversation with Chris, because it's a leka back and forth, and that's kind of what's going on here. But Neil, I'll give you a chance for final words, and then when you wrap up, then I'll let you drop off. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Yeah, Chris, firstly, you are not supposed to be a popular person when you are a leader. You are supposed to be an effective leader. I am not here to take popular decisions. I'm here to take the right decisions for the country. Number two, we cannot remain in history. We must never forget it, but we must move on now as a nation. Thirdly, politicians are not the hope and the future of this country. It is the normal citizen X that has the power to fix this country. And lastly, Chris, thank you to you. It is a long journey with you. You are a great friend of mine. Say that just at certain places. But one thing I know, you love our country. You are passionate about us. And for that, you are a voice that is always there, and a voice that reminds us what we can, should, and will be. So God bless you and your country. And we are side by side. And I look forward to having you back here to threaten you with a good boerewors, pap, and a brandewyn.
All right. Now, I'll tell you right now, I don't eat pop. It doesn't matter how drunk you get me. I don't touch pop. I'll enjoy the boerewors. I'll enjoy the braai, but keep the pop away from me. I used to grow maize. I don't want to eat ground maize.
Okay, so then braaibroodjie.
There you go. Oh, yeah, braaibroodjie. Sure, I've had those. Yeah, there you go. That'll work.
Thank you.
All right.
God bless you.
All right,
thank
Neil.
you all for giving me an opportunity.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Neil de Beer, the president of the United Independent Movement. I'll let Neil drop off, and then I'll close up the broadcast for today. Thank you all so much for being here. And I hope that you found this informative, interesting. Maybe I can help Neil. There, he's got himself out. It's been a really enjoyable broadcast, and it comes after a very busy morning. I did a summary of the events in America for my first broadcast this morning, unexpected, to wrap up and summarize the events in Washington, D.C. between the American Airlines flight and the U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter. 67 people perished, 64 on the American Airlines flight, 3 crew members, a pilot, a co-pilot, Army captain, a chief warrant officer, 2, and a crew chief, a staff sergeant, perished in that horrific situation. Then we did the news after that, and in that news we're interrupted by Donald Trump in a press conference with his senior officers or officials, and then this interview with Neil de Beer. It's been a busy day. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for those who have been watching my new video on the Trump and what it means. I see a lot of usernames I'm not familiar with. Yes, talk is cheap there, Dwayne. It is very cheap, but I'm a person that doesn't talk. I do. Neil is trying to do. And you can take a look at his party. You can ignore his party. You can gravitate to it, whatever. But you have agency, and that's part of the problem. Too many people think the government is supposed to do something for them. No, government is supposed to be responsive to your wants and needs. That's why they exist. We form governments as a polity to meet our mutual needs, mutual defense and prosperity. not to feed us, to clothe us, to take care of us. That's not the role of government. And South Africans need to wake up to that reality. You have agency. Americans are waking up to that reality, and that's what's happening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for this broadcast. Once again, be sure to hit the like button if you haven't done it already. Boy, I got to tell you, I'm almost reticent to end a broadcast with 700 people on it, but I do appreciate being here, and I don't want to waste your time. I know your data and your time is valuable. I hope you've enjoyed this. Be sure to leave a comment behind if you like on the video afterwards. Post it, and you can also give us a like if you don't mind. And thanks for the few super chats that came in, but really thanks for all the people who are here. I really enjoyed it. We'll get Neil back on as soon as possible, but given his health and his work schedule, it isn't always possible. In the near future, I'm expecting to have David Ansarin from the Free Market Foundation. Also, Kanthan Pillay will be back on the program sometime soon, and a few other guests who I will hold in reserve for now, and we'll talk about events in South Africa. And with that, folks, that's going to do it. God bless. Have a good day. Don't take any wooden nickels, as Big Daddy Liberty, Sile Nkobisa, and the Citizen Concern like to tell you. Never trust a commie, and I agree with you. Never trust a commie. Be safe out there, and take care of yourselves. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You just got to get involved and do your share. But don't sweat it. We're going to take care of things. God bless.